Hi, everybody. Jake here. Um, Before we get to the book review, obviously, if you're familiar with the booktube space, you'll know that this past week has really been a roller coaster. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of emotions. I mean, there could end up being legal ramifications before it's all said and done. It's been absolutely wild. And I waited a bit before I weighed in on the issue, and I kind of feel now that now I think it's time to kind of throw my thoughts into that space. And so let me take this moment to say that the elusive exclusive book society is back. This time we'll be chatting about The Big Guy by Wade Miller, and we're joined by Jim from Mystery and Mayhem and Duncan McCurdy from Duncan McCurdy. If you think you're big enough, come join us over at the Book Graveyard this Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, live. Welcome to Pulp Mortem, the search for a lost fantasy classic. Oh, you all think you're so funny, don't you? But first, let's talk about Susie. Patricia Ann Suzette Wilkins was an American author and linguist born November 18, 1936, and she died in 2015 at the age of 78. Hal? What are you doing here, Hal? She started going by Suzette in college, as many of her friends were also named Patricia, and she adopted the surnames of her two husbands, rounding out the name we all know her as, Suzette Haden Elgin. Elgin suffered spinal polio as a child, but refused surgery and instead opted to wear a back brace her entire life. Her first science fiction story was accepted by the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction in May of 1969, and the next year she began pursuing her master's degree in linguistics. Elgin became a professor at San Diego State University and retired in 1980 to pursue writing full-time. Language was a theme in all of her books, most notably her extensive verbal self-defense series, and she even created a new language for the Native Tongue series of science fiction novels. A proud Missourian, Ozark customs influenced many of her works, especially the Ozark Fantasy Trilogy, but her greatest influence was feminism, as seen in her Coyote Jones series and much of her work. She was a major supporter of the feminist science fiction movement, stating that SF needed to be treasured and supported by women since it's the only place where women could be freed from the oppressive real world. Elgin was a member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. She was awarded several poetry awards, and she founded the Ozark Center for Language Studies and the Science Fiction Poetry Association. All in, this folk music playing Missourian published over 30 nonfiction books, a bunch of short stories and poetry collections, and 13 science fiction novels. Which brings us to 12 fair kingdoms. The answer to a challenge is a quest, and if you want to stop mischief, the magic is best. 12 Fair Kingdoms is an original story first published by Doubleday in 1981. In fact, the entire trilogy was published in 81, with a book club edition trilogy the very next year. I own the 1983 Berkeley paperback. It is 195 pages and originally cost $2.50. The cover art is by Frederick Marvin, and it's fine, I guess. I mean, it's painted well. Okay, I hate it. The first edition hardcover goes for around $20 online, but the paperback that I have is only for, $5 or $6, maybe even cheaper. We're in week 2 of Fantasy February, where I made the grave mistake of allowing you out there to choose what I read. 136 votes, and 35% of you are officially dead to me. I mean, look at these other covers. These are very cool. Nope. Flying donkeys. Read the flying donkeys. Read it. Read it and dance, monkey boy. In the year 2012, 12 families from the Ozarks fled Earth and struck out into the universe to find a new home. With fuel running low, they barely managed to make it to this planet, and they find, much to their delight, a beautiful, peaceful, lush planet. It's a far cry from Earth's pollution and crime and violence and war and people that are other colors. I didn't write it. We enter the story after 1,000 years have passed, and the people of Mark Twain the people of Mark Twain have proposed a confederation of all the 12 kingdoms, and this will hopefully be codified in the upcoming Grand Jubilee. But something is very wrong in the kingdom of Mark Twain. I have a hard time saying that. Something is very wrong in the kingdom of Mark Twain. All of the milk has turned sour. Now, that's not an anecdote or a euphemism or a phrase. all the milk in the kingdom has turned sour. All of the street signs are now backwards. The mules that are flying around have started to wobble. And, also a baby gets kidnapped. But to be fair, the baby is not like in danger. It's the baby's in a tree, stuck up in a tree, but it's in a life support bubble, so it's perfectly safe. Clearly someone is opposed to the confederation of these kingdoms and instead is out using magic to cause mischief. Our hero, the 14-year-old Responsible of Brightwater, that's her name, Responsible of Brightwater, decides that a quest is in order. So, she hops on her mule and travels to the 11 other kingdoms to seek out the bottom of this mystery, to discover who is causing this mischief before more mischief happens. Okay, I will say this. This story is unique. I've never read anything quite like this, and so that's a good thing. If you look at reviews online, some people really, really like this book, okay? So some people love that. That's a good thing. That's what has going for it. It's very unique. The protagonist, Responsible of Brightwater, boy, her name just flies off the tongue, doesn't it? Is a flawed character, which I can actually appreciate. She makes mistakes. She overreacts. Sometimes she actually makes matters worse. This is kind of surprising, considering some of Elgin's beliefs, which we'll get into in a bit. Now, I will say that this protagonist wasn't particularly likable. At least not to me. I think we were going for sassy, but she just came across as very rude. But listen, to be perfectly fair, I enjoy a flawed character. It makes for a realistic character. I mean, you have flaws. I have flaws as well. I mean, you guys have never seen any of my flaws, but I do have them. Anyway, props for a realistic character. Elgin's writing style. She definitely has her own voice. If I was to read something else by her, I would be able to recognize her voice instantly. Now, I can't fault her writing. She's a fine writer. It's composed very well. She's good. But there is a prose that is unmistakably and unapologetically Ozark. I did not particularly enjoy her style.
Hey, Jake, we're still in the good section, you know. It seems like you didn't really like this.
Correct, I did not like this. Some people really do like her style, and I can see some of you maybe liking her style. That's a matter of taste. Some people like Jeff Dunham. Some people think that's funny. Some people like Bruce Springsteen because it's completely normal to refer to yourself as the boss in the third person. That's a normal thing to do. Elgin is her style. She's black licorice, right? She's a black licorice. Some people think black licorice is the best candy there is. And that's there. We all know people who love it. You might be someone who loves black licorice, but we know just as many people, if not more, who would rather eat a stick of dynamite.
While it's still a season.
And now, the bad. I'm going to read you guys the very first line, okay? Here we go. I should have known that something was very wrong when the mules started flying erratically. If you can make it past that first line, then you are treated to a meeting around a conference table that goes for pages and pages and pages. Hey everyone, want to hook that reader? Boom! Meetings! In my opinion, this is the absolute best way to get someone to DNF your book before they even reach chapter 2. I think this is what the kids call cozy fantasy. Not a lot happens, the stakes are very low, nobody really gets hurt, and the danger level is almost non-existent. I mean, if Responsible of Brightwater fails in her quest, they can't throw a party? Oh no! I wish I could say that after the meeting things got more exciting, but that's not really the case. It kind of stayed like our heroine flies from kingdom to kingdom. She lands where she is greeted. She is fed. Usually there's some sort of party or entertainment or fanfare or whatever. They talk, and then she leaves. Fine, okay. This happens 11 times. Sometimes something different would happen in the midst of that formula. Sometimes. The only memorable scene in this book is at one point she lands her mule in the middle of the wilderness, and then she is ambushed and attacked by a cave cat. And so you can imagine, I was reading like, oh my gosh, because it was like I was a dying man in the middle of a desert and somebody handed me a Sonic cherry limeade. I'm just guzzling to see what's happening next. And then somehow, and you guys, I don't know how, I legitimately do not know how Elgin did this. Somehow it got boring. Now, I do not know how you make a teenage girl getting mauled by a giant alien cat boring, but hats off, you did it. I am not going to lie to you. I was rooting for the cave cat. At this point, you all probably know that a glut of characters can be a pet peeve of mine. Now, again, this isn't to say that having a robust cast can't or shouldn't be done. In fact, it's been done very well in the past, and some books I enjoy have very large ensemble casts. But if the author's going to do that, then they need to be very careful to give each character enough time and attention so that we can form a real character in our minds. If not, it actually detracts from the story because we are just reading names on a page, right? And it'll suck us clean out of immersion. And that's just my opinion, although I'm clearly right about it. All right. 195 pages, right? 195 pages. Can you guess how many characters are in this book? Because I recorded every single one of them. 195. Guess. Guess how many? You're not going to get it. 80. 80. Let me be clear about something. I am not talking about background characters. I'm not talking about a servant that came by or somebody that took her mule into the stables. I'm talking about characters. Characters we are introduced to. Characters with names, with lines, and with direct interaction with our protagonist. 80! This means that we are introduced to a brand new character every 2.4 pages. This is the new definition of insanity.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
So the trouble with this, other than the obvious, is that when Responsible of Brightwater is remembering or reminiscing a previous conversation or referencing someone that she talked to 50 pages ago, or somebody else comes into the story that was in the past or a previous character, it takes me a while to remember, wait a minute, is this a character we've already met before? Then I have to scroll back, skim back through the book, find out where that character was, and oh, okay, I see, we met you 50 pages ago, and now we're continuing this conversation, so I have to reread that whole section just to backtrack, reread that section just so I have the context of this continued conversation, which ends up not making a difference anyways, because nothing is bloody happening! I am Teflon, nothing sticks to me, I'm good, I'm okay, it's just a book, it's just a book, it's just a book. Elgin's was an outspoken feminist. It's fine. I'm not a feminist, but I'm not anti-feminist. I don't hate feminists. In fact, I'm friends with a great many people who would choose to identify as feminists. I'm not red-pilled. I'm not a misogynist. I try to be as egalitarian as I possibly can, treating men and women equally. I think that's right.
I'm triggered.
This is my stance on most things. This is my political stance. I mean, you could say, oh, you've used a clip of Trump. Yes, and I've used a clip of Biden. I don't care. I'm not playing these games. But I also understand that just by me bringing this up, people are going to put their thoughts into my words and get all riled up. And you might get all riled up just by me bringing this up. You'll say, well, women are oppressed, or the movement has gone too far and now men are oppressed. Or you say, well, if you don't stand with us, you don't stand against us. You need to take a stand. No, no, I don't. And here's the reason why. I personally don't like labels. The reason being is once you accept a label, then you're also labeled with other people. And there is a spectrum inside every ideology, inside every political belief, religious, social ideology. There is a spectrum in there. And there, I believe, are lines in those spectrums that shouldn't be crossed. Here's an example. I'm a Christian, and that's actually one of the only labels I'll actually claim. But even under that umbrella of identity, there are the Westboro Baptist Church, there's Joel Osteen, there's Benny Hinn. So even under that label, I have to say and draw that delineation, say, okay, I'm a Christian here, but we're not all alike. I'm not with them. In regard to feminism, the spectrum goes all the way back to first wave feminism, which, I mean, Susan B. Anthony, who, great gal, did some great things. She even once said, a woman in her rights, nothing less. A man in his rights, nothing more. I mean, so even way back then, there was a spirit of animus towards the opposite sex. I'm not opposed to equality. I'm opposed to hatred. So what are you saying? Here's what I'm saying. If somebody says, I'm a Christian, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person follows Christ. I mean, even the Bible says you'll know a tree by its fruit. Basically, essentially saying, we don't care what you say. What matters is what you're actually doing. So when somebody like me says I'm not a feminist, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a misogynist. And just because somebody says I am a feminist doesn't necessarily mean that they are or are not also a misandrist. I know feminists who are loving, sweet, kind people who love equality. And I know feminists who are man-hating harpies.
How dare you!
My grandmother stepped in. The man was getting above himself, but tact, of course, was necessary. Men are a great deal of trouble, I must say. All their poor, burdened wives, doing their best to clean up after their worthless men folk. And I could have read 6 more of those. There was a lot in here. Every man in this book was an idiot, he was incompetent, or he was just a joke. Maybe one of the main reasons why I didn't really connect with this book was because it was not written for me, and Elgin was very intentional on making sure that I knew that.
Hey, Jake, you know a ton of those old books are misogynistic.
Yeah, I criticize those too. I'm not apologizing for being consistent. That's why I'm criticizing Suzette Haden Elgin. Ugh, too heavy, man. Okay. Was there any fun? Yeah, I wrote down fabric porn. I love it when an author's hobbies and interests kind of bleed through. But it's actually impressive taking an entire page to describe this outfit. Every stitch, fabric used, buckle, clasp. I get the feeling that whenever Susie wasn't writing, we could find her in Joanne Fabrics. Flying mules. Hard SF purists, close your ears at this point. These mules are the primary means of transportation in Mark Twain, or whatever this world's called. They don't move their feet. They just there's no propulsion. You slap them on the rump and zing, 60 miles an hour. Just a firm slap and whoosh, you're hauling ass. And I'm not cursing because, literally it's a flying ass. Spoiler alert, if you care. We do end up figuring out who is responsible for this mischief. How did we figure it out? Well, because after the quest was unsuccessful, Responsible of Brightwater returns home and casts a spell that reveals who did it. Why didn't you just do that from the start? There's like a baby hanging from that tree. Whatever. Underwhelming would be an understatement. I didn't remember who this particular character was. I had to look it up, of course. Literally 120 pages ago, Responsible of Brightwater shares a meal and they have a conversation that lasts about a page or two. That's it. Like I said, 120 pages ago, and this is our villain. But you say, well, wait a minute, Jake, a female villain? If Elgin is such a staunch, outspoken feminist, like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's not very feminist. Don't worry, we do end up finding out that her cowardly husband was the one who made her do it. Why? I don't know. And I don't care. So what's the verdict? Return to Pulp.
Because of the way this knoll system works and jumping, and it's their only way to travel through space? The f*** is that?
I acknowledge that this Ozarkian flavor of cozy fantasy is not for me, and despite my criticisms of Elgin, I am able to separate the art from the artist and judge it accurately. But what I can't forgive is how unbelievably boring this is. Just to be clear, the issue is not a lack of action. Drama can be engaging without a single punch thrown or a single ray gun fired. But this book meanders without purpose. You can create the most fantastical world, but if there's nothing happening in it, then who cares? And that is my review of 12 Boring Kingdoms. Thanks a lot, everybody. This sucked. Have you read this? If so, don't write it in the comments. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. Write something else. We are moving on. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time with you. You guys, do you see how happy I am now? Oh, thank God that's over with. I'll see you all next time with The Swordsman of Mars.
Perfection.